So in this lesson, they're talking about the distance formula and the midpoint formula. And I went ahead and included both of those formulas from the formula sheet. And I also have a reminder of the Pythagorean theorem up here because the Pythagorean theorem can be used to find the distance, and it's actually the same thing. And so I'll kind of show you what I mean by that in just a second. So let me see if I can get to the next page. Here we go. So it says, use the graph to answer the following questions. You are helping to plan a community garden. Sprinklers need to be set up at each end of the garden plot for irrigation, plus one more at the midpoint. This first question said, what is this in the distance formula? Now keep in mind I used a different graph, so this isn't going to match up exactly, but let's go back over how to use the distance formula. The formula is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. But let me show you what that actually means. Like if we drew our lines to get from one point to the next following the grid, this makes a right triangle. And when we say x2 minus x1, we're actually saying what's the distance between these two x values? And when we say y2 minus y1, we're saying what is the distance between these two y values? So, in this example, we could count the spaces. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces over. And then we go from -2 up to +4. So we go 6 spaces up. But you could just look at your ordered pairs and you could use those values to figure it out. So if you wanted to tie this back to the Pythagorean theorem, you could say 6 squared plus 6 squared equals we don't know squared. So you get 36 plus 36. And then you add those together. Let's see, that's a 2, carry the 1, 4, 72, I think. And then to finish the Pythagorean theorem, you would take the square root. And so you would get the square root of 72. Whoops, that's not a 7. 72. Now let's talk about how to actually use the distance formula, because you're going to have to be able to use that as well. In the distance formula, you need to label your ordered pairs. So every ordered pair is x, then y, x, then y. Since this is, and it doesn't matter which one you label as the first one, but I'm going to label this as my first ordered pair because it's point A, and I'm going to label this as my second ordered pair because it's point B. And then I'm going to plug things into the formula where they belong. So x2 minus x1 would be 6 minus 0 squared. And then y2 minus y1, my y2 is -2. My y1 is 4. And I'm just going to show you the math here. I know on this first example on the quick check, it just wants you to write out the formula. But I want to show you the math as well. 6 minus 0 is 6. So you get the square root of 6 squared plus -2 minus 4 is a -6. And if you square 6 squared, you would get, 36. And -6 squared, a negative times a negative is going to also be a positive 36. And then you would end up with the square root of 72. So you get the same answer whether you use Pythagorean theorem or the distance formula. So it's totally up to you. If they give you a graph, it might be easier for you to use Pythagorean theorem, but if they just give you 2 points, then it might be kind of annoying to graph those 2 points and then draw your triangle and then figure it out. So if you're just given 2 points, the distance formula is definitely a little bit shorter. Anyways, I think on the quick check though, it just wanted you to plug them in. Let me head back over here. I went the wrong direction. So on this next one, it's the same situation, the same graph, and it says calculate the distance. Oh, I just did that. But it does say to the nearest whole number. So we already kind of found the distance as the square root of 72. So I'm just going to move that distance over here. D equals the square root of 72. But it doesn't ask for the square root of 72. It asks you to the nearest whole number. So that's when we're going to have to pull out our calculator. And I'm going to type in to see what the square root of 72 equals. That is 8.485. 5. So let me go ahead and write that down. This is approximately 8.485. And since it says round to the nearest whole number, I like to underline where I'm rounding to, and then I circle the number after that. If this number is a 5 or higher, you're going to round up. If it's less than 5, it's going to stay the same. So the nearest whole number in my example would be 8. And then let's look at this one. Oops. It says find the midpoint where the third sprinkler needs to be placed. Okay, so the midpoint is halfway between the two endpoints. So most of us can kind of look and get a general idea of about where halfway would be, but it's hard to get an exact midpoint without using the formula. You know, we can see it somewhere in here, but we're not exactly sure where. So let's look at the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula, you still have to label your each ordered pair with x's and y's. And then because you want to be right in the middle of the x values, you would take your two x values and you would add them up and then divide by 2. And so 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So the x value of the midpoint is going to be 3. Now remember, because it's a point on a graph, it has to have an x value and a y value. So then we're going to do the y's. We're going to add up the two y values. So let's see, add 4 plus -2 and divide it by 2. And I should mention here, when you're adding, the order does not matter. So I know in the formula, and let me see if I can go back a few pages. In the formula, it says to label your x1 and your x2 and your y1 and y2. But remember, when you add, you can add in any order that you want. That's the commutative property of addition. It doesn't matter the order. Subtraction, the order does matter, but when you add, the order doesn't matter. So that's why I didn't really spend too long labeling, you know, which one was x1 and x2, because I'm adding them up. So -4 plus -2, this gives me a +2 divided by 2, which equals 1. And that looks right where we drew our point, over 3 up 1. So that is going to be our midpoint, is 3, 1. Remember, a midpoint is a point on a graph, so it does have to be written as an ordered pair. And I think that was it for this quick check. So just remember, you have your distance formula, your midpoint formula, and when you label everything, you label all your ordered pairs x and y, and then you can label them 1s and 2s, and then you can plug them in. Good luck on this quick check.